Hello guys, welcome to a new video. If you've been following me for a while, you may have a weird sense of deja vu at this point because I have made a video on this subject before, but from the moment I made that video I wasn't very satisfied with it. To start with, I decided it was a good idea to try and record a video while there was an air show going on, so I was trying to record in between the sounds of planes flying over my house. So the audio was really choppy. I didn't feel like my art was up to the standard I wanted in that video either, and I didn't feel like I got my points across well enough. So all in all, I just decided it would be better to make a new version of it, and hopefully it can help some of you guys out. So the subject of art style is something that comes up a lot, and it's understandably very important to a lot of artists, both in terms of your development, your satisfaction with your own work, and of course the fact that clients and art directors and various other people who are paying you for your services are going to have found you through your style or picked you for your style. And of course there are other factors at play, such as your turnaround time, your ability to work to a brief, and so on. But for the most part, they will probably have found you through enjoying the style and the look of your work. And so it's something that I think a lot of young artists then get hung up on, and they assume that right from the off they have to have artwork that looks like nobody else's. And unfortunately this is a huge misconception, because I believe that focusing on finding your art style too soon in your artistic development is really going to hinder you later on, and I can say that from personal experience. Because when I was a teenager, I was really focused on finding a style, and I just put everything else aside because I assumed that once I'd found a unique style, then nothing else mattered. And that was a huge mistake, because it did then put my development back by I don't even know how many years, but you can tell, I mean, you can't technically because I have taken down most of my old artwork. I used to have a deviant art gallery that had been up for about 10 years, but I deleted it. But you could tell looking back on the artwork from that I had no knowledge of the fundamentals behind the artwork. I was just drawing things and trying to stylize, but to stylize you need a basis, you need something to build on. It's like trying to build a house without a foundation. You have to have something behind your style that you started with. And so when you start with nothing, you're stylizing with no real knowledge of why. And so really you need to take the proper steps and take the proper route to get to where you want to go with your artwork. It's not something you can really kind of skip. And obviously everyone's artistic development is different and everyone approaches things differently. There is no real right way to do things in the art world because it's just so subjective. But skipping your fundamental skills and jumping straight past those to go into stylization and drawing cartoon artwork and so on, I think is something that really is going to damage your ability to learn and your ability to develop as you get older. Everyone draws differently, regardless of whether they try to. So if you set several people the same assignment and told them to draw the same thing in exactly the same way, they would still look different because they are different people. We're not robots or clones of each other, and so by nature we will all approach a project differently and we'll end up with different results. And so I think from the very beginning you have a unique look to your work just from the way that you take it on and the way you look at it and the way you see it, and that's just natural. So from the beginning you do have to a degree your own style, but it's then kind of just building on your experiences. So I think by nature when you're very young you will not have had that kind of knowledge to build into your work. It's like kind of having an inspirational pool which you need to keep filling up with new things. You can't draw from it when there's nothing in there. So what you need to do is, when you're starting to learn to draw, just dismiss all thoughts of a unique style out of your mind. I know it's very tempting to think right from the off, I want to make my work unique and make it stand out and make it amazing, but just dismiss all thoughts of that because you need to build your core skills first. And then do your studies, study anatomy, colour theory. I don't know how good your art curriculums are in your respective countries. I mean, mine didn't really teach any of that, so it may be something that you need to seek out yourself. And it's pretty easy to do because online now there are so many resources, and if you can go to life drawing classes, that is a huge help. I think they're really useful. Unfortunately I can't attend them because of my working schedule being all over the place. But if you can't because of cost or location or whatever, that's totally understandable. There are lots of resources online that you can use. I'll see if I can find some and link them in the description. But yeah, there are lots of resources online where you can draw real people from all angles, and also another really good thing is to go on Pinterest and look for portraits of people and then just study those. And as you're growing as an artist, always be open to trying different things, because one of the worst things you can do is kind of box yourself in, and that's again something that I did. I decided that I had one set way of working, and every piece that I did the same way, and you really are limiting yourself in doing that, because you won't know if you'll find a new tool that you like or a method of working that is easier for you if you don't try everything. If you're new to art, that is the time to experiment. You don't want to jump straight into focusing on one thing and then limit yourself and not focus on anything else. And always remember to take reference and inspiration from all different kinds of art. You need an entire spectrum of art to feed into that pool of inspiration. So don't just focus on one particular style. Okay, maybe like a lot of teenagers like anime art when they first start out. Okay, that's fine, you like anime art. Don't just look at anime art, because you won't learn anything outside of that. And even anime art has influences from other art styles. So everything feeds into everything else in a way, so you will be able to form your style from the different influences you've seen. And again, that goes into what I said about as you get older. You'll have seen and experienced different things and found other work that inspires you and builds into what you do. And so look at artwork you really like, look at artwork you don't necessarily like, because you still might be able to learn something from it. I've frequently found that I can learn more from watching videos that just pop up in my YouTube suggestions that I might never normally have watched than by watching illustration from somebody that works in a similar style to me, because you're seeing something that you've never seen before, and then you might be able to find something from that that you can draw into your own work. So always be open to looking at new things. You might find a particular line work style or colouring technique that you then pull into your own work. Now, speaking of looking at other artists' work, another really common misconception that I see is that copying from another artist directly will help you to improve. And I wouldn't necessarily say that is a good idea, because what happens when you copy an illustration is you see the final lines, but you don't see the context behind those lines. So you don't see the thumbnails or the sketches or the construction lines or anything else that came before those final lines. You are seeing those without the artist's unique knowledge of how they went together. So you can copy those lines, but there's nothing telling you how they got there, how they happened. And so you can't then apply that to another illustration, because you need that artist's knowledge behind them to do that. Also, by doing things that way, if the artist has made any mistakes in their work, if they have imperfections or flaws that they haven't got over yet, then you are in turn taking that into your own work, and obviously that is a huge problem as well. So just straight copying another artist's work, as well as being obviously something that you don't want to do because people don't want their artwork being copied, is that it's just skipping so much knowledge that you really need. And that's why you need your foundational skills. So when you've learnt your anatomy and perspective and everything else, then you can apply those into stylization. Because stylization is effectively the minimalization of certain areas of your artwork and exaggeration of others. So using my art as an example, I'm working in a cartoon style, so obviously I'm missing out a lot of details that you might find, for example, in a realistic portrait, but instead I'm exaggerating features like the facial features, the hair, the length of the limbs, and so on. And it's your choice what parts of your artwork you choose to minimise and what parts you want to exaggerate, based on the intention behind your work. But you cannot do that until you understand what goes on behind that. Because just copying someone else's style just doesn't show you how the body goes together, because then you can draw maybe a character in that exact same angle and that exact same pose maybe next time, but then when it comes to switching it up and drawing something different, you're stuck because you don't know how that went together. So as long as you've got to that point where you have that knowledge, then you can stylize and change and shift and warp things however you want to. Now, I think that it is important to not pin yourself down into one very particular style and then leave it at that. And again, that's something that I wanted to do when I was younger, and it is important to be able to vary your style. Your style should not be a box that you can't get out of. It has to have flexibility, and that is hugely important, both in terms of developing characters and so on, and also in applying for commission work if you're planning on going into art as a career. And that might apply to your own personal projects as well. So for example, you might want to tackle doing a landscape image and you don't want to use exactly the same line work and colouring technique that you would use in a character illustration. So you're going to want to mix it up. Always make sure you have flexibility in your work, because if your art style doesn't allow for that, and even worse, if you find yourself using your art style as an excuse for artwork that doesn't look right, then that is a real problem. So I've seen it quite a lot, discussions where people will say, oh, this looks strange in your drawing, and the artist will reply, well, that's just my style. And I think quite a lot of us are guilty of that in our younger years. I know for a fact that in my DeviantArt days, many years ago, I would respond that way to criticism. And it's a big problem, and obviously it's something you need to work on, because you have to have variation. Your characters cannot all look the same. And again, I'm going to be perfectly honest, because I boxed myself in so much as a teenager, I then have still got the repercussions of that in terms of some of my characters, when I draw them, they still have the same face. Because I was so focused on thinking, if I don't draw my next character with this exact face, then it won't be my style anymore. And you just cannot look at your own work like that. You have to allow yourself to draw things differently. Never impose restrictions on yourself, because your art style is not a restriction. Your art style is your way of conveying your work to the world. It should never be a barrier of any kind. And so another thing that I really want to point out is that as you get older, your art style is going to change, and you should be open to that and accept it and embrace it. You cannot remain the same person for years and years, and so it's natural that your artwork is going to change with you. So just run with it and see what happens, because you never have anything to lose by trying something different. That's something that took me way too long to figure out, and it's very frustrating that I resisted change for so long in my artwork, and I was so focused on doing things in a certain way for so long, and it did really hamper my progress. And so that's why I'm trying to kind of say this so firmly, because I need my younger viewers to kind of understand that focusing on limiting your work so early is really going to hurt your progress later on. One of the key points that I want to make, and I see a lot of other people making, is that your art style in a way finds you. So like I've said, you get influence from everywhere. That builds into what you do. My art style actually started to develop more after I stopped concentrating on it, so I started focusing more on the fundamentals, and then my art style kind of took care of itself. It's one of those things, the more you try to force an art style, I think the more it resists. Art styles are very flighty things like motivation, and they're very tricky to pin down and can cause you more problems than they're worth sometimes. So yeah, I honestly think, I know that's kind of counterproductive for a video about finding your art style, but honestly I think sometimes you just have to let it happen. But okay, if you get to the point where you have been drawing for a very long time and you want to pin down something more recognisable in your work, you work in a lot of varied styles, but you want to work on one particularly to make your work stand out, I still maintain that you should always have flexibility. But if you're still not satisfied and you want a particular look that you're just not finding, I would say to put together a mood board of your favourite art and see what common themes you can find and what draws you to their work. Again, make sure to pull from many different influences and inspirations, and also when you're drawing this inspiration, don't directly copy from those artists' work. So if you realise that you really like the way an artist uses colour, don't just eyedrop a bunch of colours from their work, just try and work more on concentrating on colour the same way they do. So boost the saturation in your colours or work towards a more cohesive scheme. As per usual, experimentation really is the key, so just really put the time and effort into studying what exactly it is that's drawing you to this artwork and figuring out how you can adapt that into your own. So fill up loads of sketchbooks, try different things and see what appeals to you, and you'll soon start to narrow something down. Think about what your artwork is trying to say and what it's trying to do. You may be trying to streamline your work and simplify it, so you're working on a comic and you need to be able to work on it fast, so you can't afford to spend a lot of time on fiddly details. You might be going into concept art, you want to create dramatic landscapes and you need to figure out the methods and shortcuts to achieve that. You might want your work to be very bold and angular, which is obviously the direction that I went in with mine, or you might want it to be more soft and delicate looking. And I'm an illustrator, so I draw pictures primarily to tell stories. That's kind of how I see my own work. So I needed to figure out a compromise between the look of it and the time it takes me. And it's down to you to figure what to prioritise in your work and why. But always remember that your work has to maintain adaptability for different projects. Never say, this is my art style and I'm sticking to it, because we are always growing and changing and developing as artists. And there is never a point where you'll be able to just put your pen down and say, well, that's it, I have learned everything I can ever learn, because we never ever stop learning. And over time, you and your art style will change and grow, and just run with it and embrace it and have fun with it, because that's the most important thing, is that you enjoy what you do. So I think that's pretty much all I have to say on the subject. Sorry that I had to remake this video, I just didn't feel that I got my points across well enough the last time. And I'm really sorry again that there is background noise in this one, because apparently I'm not going to be able to make this video without being interrupted. So I'm really sorry. It's very hot suddenly here in England and everyone is outside and making a lot of noise, so I apologise. But yeah, I hope the video was useful to you. If anyone is curious about this character, this is my original character Fieren. He is an undead forest spirit kind of thing. I can't really say a lot because of spoilers, because he's going to be appearing in my fantasy steampunk novel Breakwater now. I'm very excited that he actually has a story to go in. And yeah, basically he's kind of got flowers growing out of him and antlers, and he's falling to bits, and he's very sweet and very sad, and I love him. But yeah, hopefully you guys like him too. And this was quite an experimental piece, because as you can probably tell, I rely very heavily on my line art usually, so I thought I'd try relying on just my colour use instead. So it was really experimental, but hopefully I can get better at digital painting if I keep practicing. So yeah, hope it was useful to you. Please do let me know if you have any comments or feedback in the comments section below, and I really appreciate you stopping by to support me and watch my videos, so I hope to see you next time. Bye!